Ryan's office revenge. The Excel file sat on my screen like a loaded gun. Most people would have closed it immediately, minded their own business, gone back to their federal compliance reports. But I'm not most people. I'm Daniel Rodriguez, 48 years old, and after 22 years in financial services, I've learned that when confidential files end up in the wrong folders, there's usually a reason someone wanted them hidden. This Tuesday morning had started like every other day since my life fell apart 3 years ago. Coffee burned as usual at Atlantic Financial Solutions, our mid-sized government contracting firm in downtown Boston. I'd gotten up at 5:30 in my cramped Quincy apartment, checked my bank balance, $2,847, and calculated how much I needed to scrape together for Sarah's spring semester tuition at Boston University. My 19-year-old daughter was studying journalism and had dreams of working for the Globe someday. Smart kid, takes after her mother in all the good ways. My ex-wife Linda had called the night before, her voice tight with that familiar edge of controlled panic. "Daniel, Mike's early admission to Northeastern came through, but we need the deposit by Friday. $1,500. Mike, my 16-year-old son, brilliant with computers, wanted to study cybersecurity. The kid could probably hack Pentagon systems if he put his mind to it. Both my children were everything I'd hoped they'd become. Intelligent, driven, ethical. Everything Linda and I had tried to instill in them before our marriage imploded over my inability to make the kind of money that paid for their dreams without constant financial stress. I'll figure it out, I'd told her, like I always did. But figuring it out meant choosing between the deposit and my rent, or maybe picking up another freelance consulting gig on weekends. At 48, I was tired of always being one emergency away from financial disaster. Atlantic Financial specialized in budget analysis and compliance consulting for federal agencies. We helped government departments optimize spending, reduce waste, and maintain audit readiness. It was steady work, boring but stable, the kind of job that paid the bills while slowly grinding away your soul. I'd been there 18 months, recruited from a smaller firm in Hartford where I'd spent 8 years doing similar work. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days helping the government eliminate wasteful spending, while my personal finances remained a constant source of anxiety. But at $78,000 annually, plus decent health benefits, it was better than unemployment. In this market, with companies cutting costs and automating financial processes, I couldn't afford to be picky. I'd been digging through client files that morning, trying to locate historical budget data for our biggest contract, a multi-year efficiency analysis for the Department of Veterans Affairs worth $12 million to Atlantic. The project required detailed variance reports going back 5 years, and our file organization system was a disaster. Folders within folders, inconsistent naming conventions, the digital equivalent of archaeological layers. That's when I clicked on what should have been VA Historical Spending 2019-2024 and instead opened Compensation Review Internal 2024-SSX. I should have closed it immediately. Should have pretended I never saw it. But 22 years in financial analysis teaches you that when confidential data appears in the wrong location, someone made a mistake worth examining. The spreadsheet loaded with neat columns: employee name, position, department, years experience, annual salary, total compensation. Row after row of everyone at Atlantic Financial Solutions, all 650 employees laid out in black and white. I scrolled down looking for my own entry, just curious about how they'd categorized my information. There it was. Row 127. Daniel Rodriguez, Senior Financial Operations Manager, Finance Department, 22 years experience, $78,000 annual salary. That seemed accurate, if depressingly, modest for someone with my background. I'd started in this industry straight out of college in 2002, survived the 2008 recession, built financial systems that saved previous employers millions in audit fees. But the market had been brutal for experienced analysts like me. Companies preferred hiring young graduates at entry-level salaries over paying market rates for expertise. I kept scrolling, partly out of professional curiosity about industry compensation trends, partly because Sarah's tuition deadline was haunting my thoughts. Maybe I was being underpaid. Maybe I had leverage for a raise conversation. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop like a stone. Row 131. Ryan Mitchell, Senior Financial Operations Manager, Finance Department, 2 years experience, $125,000 annual salary. I stared at that number until my eyes burned. $125,000 for someone with 2 years of experience doing the exact same job I was doing. Someone I'd been mentoring for 6 months, teaching basic variance, analysis, and budget forecasting. Someone who still asked me elementary questions about Excel functions that any financial professional should know by heart. Ryan Mitchell. The name triggered recognition beyond our workplace interactions. I clicked on his employee profile link, my hands trembling slightly. Date of birth, March 15th, 1998. Education, Bachelor's in Business Administration, State University, graduated May 2022. Previous employment, marketing intern, Mitchell Commercial Properties, summer to 3. Emergency contact, Jason Mitchell. Jason Mitchell, our CEO, the man who signed my paychecks, approved my vacation requests, and apparently paid his 26-year-old son $47,000 more annually than a senior analyst with 22 years of industry experience. The kid making almost 60% more than me was the boss's son. I sat back in my ergonomic office chair, one of the few decent pieces of furniture Atlantic provided, and felt something cold and bitter settle in my chest. Around me, the office hummed with its usual Tuesday morning energy. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the low murmur of colleagues discussing quarterly projections and federal compliance deadlines. Everyone focused on their work, completely unaware that I'd just discovered what might be the most egregious example of corporate nepotism I'd encountered in over 2 decades. 22 years. I'd been doing this work since the Bush administration. I'd trained dozens of junior analysts, many of whom had eventually been promoted past me. I'd worked weekends, missed family dinners, stayed late to fix other people's mistakes. I'd survived corporate restructurings, budget cuts, and 3 different company acquisitions. And through it all, I'd told myself that competence would eventually be rewarded, that experience had value, that somewhere there was a company that would recognize my expertise. But this wasn't about market rates or performance evaluations. This was about Ryan Mitchell getting paid like a senior executive while I taught him how to read a balance sheet. I thought about Sarah's journalism classes, how she'd been taught to follow leads and verify sources. I thought about Mike's natural curiosity about systems and how they worked. Both my kids had inherited something from me. A refusal to accept things at face value when the numbers didn't make sense. And these numbers made no sense at all. I printed the spreadsheet, my hands surprisingly steady for someone whose world had just shifted on its axis. The printer hummed quietly in the corner of our floor, and I watched the pages emerge with clinical detachment. Then I began what would become the most thorough investigation of my career. The first thing I did was cross-reference names on the salary list with LinkedIn profiles and company organizational charts. What I found over the next 3 hours made my initial discovery look like a minor accounting error. Jessica Moore, Senior Marketing Analyst, $89,000 annual salary, according to LinkedIn. She'd graduated from Suffolk University in 2022 with a communications degree and had previously worked as a social media coordinator for a lifestyle blog. Her last name caught my attention. Moore. I checked the company directory. Richard Moore, Vice President of Business Development. Father and daughter. Cameron Phillips, Associate Budget Manager, $91,000. Fresh out of college with a communications degree, no relevant experience in financial analysis. Phillips. I searched again. Brandon Walsh, my direct supervisor, had a sister named Patricia Phillips, according to his emergency contact information. Nephew. The pattern was becoming sickeningly clear, but I kept digging. By lunchtime, I had identified 17 employees who were family members of executives, all hired within the last 2 years, all making salaries that would make industry veterans weep with frustration. Michelle Clark, Senior Operations Analyst, $95,000. Daughter of HR Director Samantha Clark. Previous experience: managing Instagram accounts for local restaurants. Lucas Anderson, Junior Financial Consultant, $67,000, son of our Chief Financial Officer. Started 6 months after graduating with a history degree. Dylan Garcia, Associate Marketing Manager, $73,000. Nephew of our Marketing Director. Previous job: part-time sales associate at Best Buy. Meanwhile, the people actually keeping Atlantic Financial competitive in the government contracting space were systematically underpaid. Lisa Parker, who'd been with the company 15 years and could build complex budget models faster than most people could open Excel, was making $71,000. Mark Stevens, our lead compliance officer, who had personally shepherded us through 3 federal audits without a single violation, was earning $74,000. I sat in my car during lunch break, eating a sandwich from the convenience store down the street, $4.99, that I calculated automatically against my weekly grocery budget, and felt something that went beyond anger. It was the cold, methodical rage of someone who'd been played for a fool and was just now realizing it. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Did you transfer Mike's deposit yet? The deadline is Friday." I stared at the message for a long time before responding, "Working on it." But as I sat there, surrounded by the paper trail of Atlantic Financial's systematic nepotism, a different kind of calculation began forming in my mind. Not about money or college tuition or overdue bills, about justice, about the value of 22 years of expertise, about whether I was going to spend the rest of my career accepting scraps while connected kids got the feast. I walked back into the office at 1:15 p.m. and immediately ran into Ryan Mitchell near the elevators. He was wearing a designer shirt that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month, holding a coffee cup from that expensive place on Newbury Street. "Hey, Daniel," he said with that easy smile I was beginning to hate. "I'm having trouble with the variance analysis for the VA contract. Could you take a look when you get a chance?" I studied his face, looking for any sign that he understood the absurdity of what he was asking. A 26-year-old making $125,000 asking me to fix his work because he didn't understand basic financial analysis. But there was nothing there except entitled expectation, the casual assumption that my expertise was at his disposal. "Sure," I said calmly. "Send me what you have?" "You're the best," he said, already walking away. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Neither do I, kid. Neither do I." I spent the afternoon pretending to work on routine compliance reports, while actually building a comprehensive case that would make any employment attorney salivate. I pulled salary surveys from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, compensation data from government contracting industry associations, and public filings from comparable firms. What I discovered was that Atlantic Financial wasn't just playing favorites, they were systematically suppressing wages for experienced employees while paying family connections salaries that were 40 to 60% above market rate for their actual qualifications. Ryan Mitchell's $125,000 was nearly double what someone with 2 years of experience should earn in our industry. Meanwhile, my $78,000 was about $15,000 below market rate for someone with my background. But the real kicker was discovering that Atlantic Financial had received $8.2 million in federal efficiency consulting contracts over the past 2 years. We were literally being paid by taxpayers to identify wasteful government spending while engaging in the most wasteful compensation practices imaginable. By 4 p.m., I had 52 pages of documentation. Salary comparisons, industry benchmarks, organizational charts showing family relationships, even email threads I'd saved where Ryan and other family hires had asked me to essentially do their jobs for them. I formatted it professionally, added charts and graphs that told the story in stark visual terms. The kind of presentation that corporate boards pay consultants $200,000 to produce. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using skills that Atlantic undervalued to document exactly how they were undervaluing them. At 5:30 p.m., most people had cleared out for the day. I sat alone in the gradually emptying office, looking at my computer screen where a new email draft was waiting. The recipient list contained every single employee at Atlantic Financial Solutions, all 650 names from the company directory. The subject line read, "What Atlantic Financial doesn't want you to know about your pay." But before I could send it, I needed to have one conversation first. I needed to give Samantha Clark, our HR director, the chance to explain how a government contractor could justify paying executives' children premium salaries while suppressing wages for the people who actually delivered the work. I scheduled a meeting for first thing Wednesday morning. Compensation. Discussion was all I wrote in the calendar request. That night, I called my kids. Sarah answered while studying for an economics midterm. "Dad, you sound different. Everything okay?" "Just working on something important at the office," I said. "How's school?" We talked for 20 minutes about her classes, her professors, her dream of investigative journalism. She was excited about a class on corporate accountability reporting, how journalists uncovered stories about workplace discrimination and executive compensation abuse. The professor says most corporate scandals happen because employees stay quiet, she told me. People are afraid to speak up about what they see. After I hung up, I sat in my small apartment looking at the stack of documents on my kitchen table. Tomorrow morning, I would give Atlantic Financial's leadership one opportunity to do the right thing. If they chose not to take it, I would make sure that 650 employees, several federal agencies, and every business journalist in Boston understood exactly what kind of company they were really working for. 22 years in this industry had taught me that numbers don't lie, even when the people reporting them do. And these numbers told a story that demanded to be heard. Wednesday morning came with the kind of gray March drizzle that makes Boston feel like the end of the world. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., not from anxiety, but from the strange calm that comes when you've made a decision that will change everything. I dressed carefully, my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to my father's funeral 3 years ago, the one that made me look like someone who couldn't be dismissed easily. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, I knocked on Samantha Clark's office door. She looked up from her computer with that practiced HR smile, all warmth and professional concern. "Daniel, good morning. Coffee? I was just reviewing your personnel file." I'm fine, thanks. I sat down across from her imposing mahogany desk and placed a folder containing my 52-page analysis directly in front of her. I need to discuss a compensation issue. Her smile faltered slightly. What kind of issue? I opened the folder to reveal salary comparison charts, names highlighted in yellow, family relationship diagrams that looked like something from a criminal investigation. Yesterday, while searching for client files, I accessed internal compensation data. I'd like an explanation for why employees with family connections to executives are being paid 40 to 60% above market rate, while experienced staff are systematically underpaid. Samantha's eyes dropped to the papers. For exactly 3 seconds, her professional mask slipped, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not surprise, not confusion. Fear of someone whose carefully constructed house of cards had just caught fire. "Daniel," she said slowly, her voice taking on that careful tone HR directors use when they're buying time to think. "This information is confidential personnel data that you shouldn't have accessed. I understand that. But now that I've seen it, I need you to explain how Atlantic Financial justifies paying Ryan Mitchell $125,000 while I make $78,000 for identical work. How Jessica Moore earns $89,000 with a communications degree while Lisa Parker, with 15 years of experience, makes $71,000. How we tell our federal clients that we are experts in eliminating waste while we pay executives' children premium salaries for work they can't actually perform." Samantha folded her hands on her desk, shifting into full corporate damage control mode. Compensation decisions at Atlantic Financial are based on complex factors: market conditions, growth potential, strategic organizational value, negotiation outcomes. There are nuances that can't be understood by reviewing isolated data points. Nuances. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something cold and patient settle in my chest. Let me be more specific. Ryan Mitchell is documented as having 2 years of experience. I have 22 years. We have identical job titles. I've been training him because he doesn't understand basic financial analysis. What nuances justify paying him $47,000 more annually? I'm not at liberty to discuss another employee's compensation details. Then let's discuss mine. Was I hired significantly below market rate, while the CEO's son, who's fundamentally unqualified for this position, received a premium salary package because of his last name? The silence stretched between us like a wire under tension. I could see Samantha calculating, weighing her options, probably wondering how contained this problem was and how much damage control would be required. "Daniel," she finally said, her voice dropping into something colder and more calculated, "I understand this might feel inequitable from your perspective. But Atlantic Financial operates in a competitive environment. Sometimes attracting high-potential talent requires offering packages that reflect future value rather than current experience. High-potential talent." I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting each syllable. "Is that what we're calling nepotism now?" Her expression hardened completely, the professional warmth evaporating. "I think we're done here." She stood abruptly, walked to her office door, and opened it. The dismissal was unmistakable. "You have 2 options, Daniel. Accept the position you agreed to when you signed your employment contract, or resign. Those are your choices." I stood slowly, gathered my folder, and looked directly at her. "Actually, Samantha, I have a 3rd option." I walked out of her office with measured steps, ignoring the administrative assistants who pretended they hadn't overheard everything. The elevator ride back to my floor felt like descending into a different world, one where I was no longer a grateful employee hoping for recognition, but someone with nothing left to lose. Back at my desk, I opened my computer and pulled up the email draft I'd prepared the night before. The recipient list contained all 650 Atlantic Financial employees, from entry-level analysts to the executive team. The subject line read, "The compensation truth Atlantic Financial doesn't want you to know." I attached my complete report and wrote a message that was clear, direct, and absolutely devastating. Colleagues, you deserve to know what your experience is actually worth. You deserve to understand why some people advance while others stagnate despite superior qualifications. Atlantic Financial has built its success on your expertise, your overtime hours, and your dedication, while systematically underpaying experienced employees and rewarding family connections over competence. The attached analysis documents a compensation structure that would be illegal if applied based on race or gender. Instead, it's based on family relationships, which makes it legal but no less discriminatory. Read the data. Look at the numbers. Decide for yourself whether this represents the kind of company you want to build your career with. Daniel Rodriguez, Senior Financial Operations Manager, 22 years experience, $78,000 annual salary. My finger hovered over the send button for exactly 10 seconds while I thought about Sarah's college tuition, Mike's dreams of studying cybersecurity, the child support payments, the mortgage on my small apartment, 22 years of playing by rules that were rigged against me. I clicked send. The email disappeared into the digital ether with a soft whoosh sound that seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet office space around me. I leaned back in my chair, hands perfectly steady, and waited for the explosion. It didn't take long. At 8:47 a.m., my inbox showed the first reply. "Holy shit, Daniel. This is insane." By 9:05, I had 23 responses. By 9:20, people were standing in hallways with their phones out, voices rising in disbelief and anger. Is this data real? Look at Ryan's salary. I've been training him for months. Check out Jessica Moore, $89K for managing Instagram. Accounts? How is this legal? By 9:30, someone had printed the entire 52-page report and was taping sections to the bulletin board outside our main break room. A crowd gathered, people pointing at specific salary figures, taking photos with their phones, calling colleagues from other departments. The finance floor, normally a quiet maze of cubicles and concentrated analysis, had transformed into something that looked like the aftermath of a revolution. Groups of employees clustered around computer screens, faces flushed with anger and betrayal. Lisa Parker, who I'd worked alongside for 18 months, walked up to my desk with tears in her eyes. "Daniel, thank you," she said quietly. "I've been here 15 years. 15 years of being told I wasn't ready for promotion, that I needed more experience. And Jessica Moore, who can't build a basic Excel model, is making $18,000 more than me." At 9:52 a.m., I heard Jason Mitchell's voice echo down the hallway from the executive elevator. Sharp, furious, the sound of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. "Who the hell authorized this? Samantha, get up here right now. Brandon, conference room immediately." Heavy footsteps, slamming doors, the unmistakable sound of panic at the executive level. At 10:15 a.m., my desk phone rang. Internal extension, probably security. "Mr. Rodriguez, you're required in Executive Conference Room 5 immediately." I looked around the chaos I'd created. Employees huddled in groups, papers scattered across desks, phones ringing constantly as word spread to other departments. After 22 years of accepting what I was given, I'd finally done something that mattered. "On my way," I said calmly, and stood up to face whatever came next. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like ascending to my own execution. But when those doors opened, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was done, being grateful for scraps. 7 people were waiting in Executive Conference Room 5. Jason Mitchell sat at the head of the polished table, his face the color of a man having a coronary. Samantha Clark gripped a legal pad like it was a life preserver. Ryan Mitchell slumped in his chair looking like he wanted to dissolve into the expensive carpet. Brandon Walsh, my supervisor, sat to the side with an expression somewhere between concern and resignation. 2 men in $3,000 suits flanked Jason. Corporate lawyers, obviously, their leather briefcases open and ready for battle. Amanda Lewis, Jason's executive assistant, sat near the door with her laptop, presumably to document whatever legal nightmare was about to unfold. "Sit down," Jason said through clenched teeth. I remained standing. "I'm fine here. What the hell do you think you're doing?" he exploded, his voice echoing off the conference room's mahogany walls. "Providing transparency," I said calmly. "You stole confidential company data and distributed it to our entire workforce. You violated your confidentiality agreement, your employment contract, and probably half a dozen federal regulations." "I accessed a file that was improperly stored in a shared directory," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I documented factual, verifiable information about compensation practices that every employee has both a legal and ethical right to understand. You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted, my voice harder now. "And unless you want this report forwarded to the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Defense Contract Audit Agency, and every business publication in New England, I suggest you listen to what I have to say." Complete silence. The kind of silence that feels like all the oxygen has been sucked out of the room. One of the lawyers leaned forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, you're in clear violation of multiple contractual obligations." "I'm in violation of nothing," I cut him off cleanly. "I documented systematic wage discrimination and shared factual compensation information. If you want to argue that transparency itself is a fireable offense, go ahead. But I'll make sure every employment attorney in Massachusetts hears about it by this afternoon." The lawyer's mouth snapped shut. Jason's hands were trembling slightly where they gripped the conference table edge. "What do you want?" he said, each word sounding like broken glass. "Market rate salary corrections for every experienced employee who's been systematically underpaid. Retroactive back pay calculated over the last 24 months. Transparent salary bands posted publicly going forward. An external third-party audit of all compensation practices conducted by an independent firm. And a written policy explicitly prohibiting nepotistic hiring." "Or?" Jason asked. "Or I walk out of this building right now, take this story to the Boston Globe, post the complete analysis on LinkedIn, file formal complaints with every relevant federal agency, and let your board of directors, your investors, and your federal contract officers decide how they feel about a consulting firm that pays the CEO's unqualified son $47,000 more than a senior analyst with 22 years of documented experience." The room went utterly still. Jason stared at me like I'd just detonated a bomb in his carefully constructed empire. "You've been here 18 months, he said slowly. "And you think you can destroy everything I've built?" "I didn't destroy anything," I said evenly. "You built this system. You created these practices. You approved paying your son premium wages while suppressing salaries for people who actually do the work. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see what was actually happening." "You're fired," Jason said flatly. "Perfect," I replied immediately. "I'll add wrongful termination and retaliation to the formal complaints I'm filing this afternoon. Should make for a very interesting discovery process during litigation." Jason's jaw worked silently. Samantha leaned over and whispered something urgent in his ear, her face pale as paper. "We'll review the compensation structure," Jason finally said. the words seeming to cause him physical pain. Internally. Confidentially. This stays inside these walls. That depends entirely on how comprehensive and honest your corrections are, I said. I walked to the door and paused without turning around. You have 72 hours to announce the external audit and salary corrections. After that, everything goes public. As I reached for the door handle, I looked directly at Ryan for the first time since entering the room. For what it's worth, this isn't personal. You didn't set your own salary, but you also didn't earn it. And somewhere along the way, someone should have told you that accepting opportunities you haven't worked for always comes with consequences. Ryan said nothing, just stared at the conference table, his face flushed with something that might have been shame. I walked out, letting the door close with a soft, final click. Behind me, I heard Jason slam his fist into the table so hard the sound echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. The aftermath unfolded exactly as I'd predicted. By noon, my company-wide email had been forwarded to external contacts across the industry. By 2 p.m., a reporter from the Boston Business Journal was asking for comment on allegations of systematic compensation discrimination at Atlantic Financial Solutions. By 4 p.m., Atlantic's board of directors had called an emergency session. And by 6 p.m., a new company-wide message went out, not from Jason, but from the board chairman. Effective immediately, Atlantic Financial is conducting a comprehensive third-party audit of all compensation structures. All employees will be contacted individually within 96 hours regarding adjustments, corrections, and retroactive back pay where applicable. 3 weeks later, I received a series of texts that told the complete story. Brandon Walsh wrote, "Daniel, salary corrections went through yesterday. Back pay hit accounts this morning. Some people cried when they saw the numbers. You changed. Lives here, thank you." Then, Ryan resigned last week. Board gave him an ultimatum. Resign voluntarily or be terminated for cause related to misrepresentation of qualifications. Finally, Jason stepped down as CEO this afternoon. Board cited governance failures and accountability issues. Samantha Clark was asked to resign as well. Thought you'd want to know. You actually did it. I read those messages sitting in my new office in Cambridge, where I'd accepted a senior financial director position at $127,000 annually, 63% more than Atlantic had been paying me. The company had reached out after reading about the Atlantic financial transparency incident in industry publications. On my first day, the CFO had shaken my hand and said, "We don't hire people based on family connections. We hire them based on what they can do. And from everything I've seen, you're exactly the kind of person who makes organizations better." That evening, I called Sarah and Mike to tell them about the new job, about how their college tuition was no longer a source of constant anxiety. Sarah, my journalism student, asked the question that mattered most. "Dad, are you proud of what you did?" I thought for a moment before answering. I'm proud that I finally stopped accepting a broken system just because it was easier than fixing it. After 22 years of playing by rules designed to keep me grateful for less than I was worth, I'd learned something that every working person eventually faces. Corrupt systems don't change because we ask politely or hope for better leadership. They change when someone finally refuses to stay silent and forces everyone to see the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to injustice is simply document it and turn on the lights. The real tragedy isn't that corrupt systems exist. It's how many good people spend their entire careers accepting them because they're afraid of what they might lose by fighting back. But I learned that the only thing worse than losing a rigged game is never realizing you had the power to change the rules all along.